Hello, hello. I hope you all are doing so well this evening. I am really excited to be here, so that might really come through. Thank you so much for being here and hearing all these incredible speakers. I'm so excited to share with you all how I sort of approach the classroom. But before I dive into that, I want you all to do a little thought experiment with me. So I'd like you all to take a moment, close your eyes if it helps, take a deep breath. It's not that intense, but get in the mood for thinking. And I want you all to imagine, what is a student? When I say the word student. And more specifically, if I say a college student. If it helps, maybe imagine that it's their first day of college, freshman year. They're trucking along to their first class. They're entering the classroom. They realize they're in the wrong classroom, so they have to leave and run to their actual classroom because they're inevitably lost on their first day. What do they look like? What do they sound like? What do you think that they're interested in? What's important to them? What do you think they want to get out of this experience of being a college student? And lastly, what do you think that they offer a classroom space? Now, most likely, this format's a little hard, right? I can't totally get feedback and answers from you all. So if you want to do like aggressive head nods at me, that's fine. I can see you. So I'm just going to imagine that you all are probably picturing a young adult, right? Probably 18 to 19, maybe a bit lost, a bit nervous, having just left home for the first time, most likely, if we're thinking sort of traditional college experience. And most likely, when I ask the question, what do they have to offer the classroom space, that might have stumped you. Because probably most of you may have imagined, they might offer their attention, right? They might offer maybe sometimes a question or two. But generally, it's not really students, we imagine, offering things to the classroom space, right? They're the ones who are receiving the education. They're the ones who are receiving the educational download that the professors are providing. And this isn't, a totally new concept or idea. In fact, it's exactly why I guessed that that's what you all were imagining. First and foremost, the university is a business, right? It's in the business of education. The university, the purveyor of education, and the students are the consumers, right? They've paid to be there, and they enter a classroom, and they receive the information. And hopefully, right, they maybe memorize it and prepare to regurgitate it for a test, and then they move on. In reference to her teaching, Audre Lorde says, "If I do not bring all of who I am to whatever I do, then I bring nothing, or nothing of lasting worth, for I have withheld my essence." So for the purposes of this talk and sharing with you all, I want to bring in a little bit more of my essence and share with you how I've gotten to the place of approaching the classroom the way I have, and how I've now sort of understood what a student is to me. And so I'm only actually 2 years removed from finishing my PhD. I spent 5 years in Chicago getting my degree in criminology, law, and justice. And I started off as a very typical graduate student. It's like I knew exactly what I needed to do to be successful, right? I attended all my classes, and I was even on time. I did all of the reading, and it was so So much reading, so much reading. Books on books weekly, sometimes daily on particularly rough weeks. I would ask questions in class, and I would provide responses when I was called upon, and all of that was on paper what I was supposed to be doing to be a successful graduate student. And yet, something was missing for me. I found myself being more and more frustrated as a student. I felt myself feeling incredibly disconnected as a student and starting to feel a bit of regret of even being there. I think there was a number of things going on, but I think one of the key reasons is because who I was as a person, the things I was experiencing outside of who I was as a student was not being brought into the classroom. In fact, I worked tirelessly to prevent those things from coming into the classroom. I had to treat the classroom as business as usual, right? And had to pretend like I wasn't being, incredibly frustrated with my workload versus my pay as a graduate student. I had to pretend like I wasn't experiencing sexual harassment in the academy. I had to pretend like all of these things weren't happening, and I couldn't bring my full self into the classroom. And now, I will say that things changed for me when I started to carve out a space where I could bring myself fully and also start to process and work through all of the education that I was currently getting. I started doing labor organizing, and specifically labor organizing with my other graduate students at my university, fighting for equity in labor, with regard to labor, but also with regard to experiences of gender-based violence within the academy. So I was finally starting to be able to put these pieces of my life together, both the personal, the work I was doing, the things I was learning. I was finally able to piece these things together for myself. And it finally solidified who I was as a graduate student, my role in the university of being a leader and an organizer and an activist, and things finally started to make sense. But those were things that I had to carve out for myself. And so, of course, I can't change my graduate school experience now, right? And hindsight is 20/20. But as I approach this position here at Montana State as an assistant professor, I started to really think about and consider what would it mean, what would it have meant for me, rather, if community and me as a holistic whole person was at the center of my classrooms? What if I would have been able to bring myself fully into the classroom? What would that have looked like for me? What would that have meant for me? Would I have been able to fully engage in the material in a more meaningful way if that was an option? And so as I think about myself as an educator here, I wanted to ensure that I was going to bring that into my classrooms here. And so, of course, I had to consider, what then does that mean? What does it mean to even bring community into a classroom or shape a classroom around this idea of community and seeing students holistically? And so this is definitely not an exhaustive list. In fact, gosh, I really hope it's not, because I'm continuing to grow and develop and learn so much. But these are some of the things that have become apparent to me in my second year here. And the first is that I have to, and I do, approach students holistically. I see them first as people, second as a student that is in my classroom, understanding that they are bringing their entire selves into the classroom. And then in turn, that allows me to bring my entire self into the classroom, to exist as holistic beings and co-constructing the space. It also means that I have to be incredibly flexible, and I want to be incredibly flexible. I want to understand that students are sometimes coming from incredibly challenging spaces, and when they enter my classroom, my class might not be the priority that week, and that has to be okay, right? And I have to work with that and understand that there's a reason for that. But more in line with what I'm gonna be sharing in just a moment, which are the student zines, the project that is so near to my heart. Two of the things that sort of paved the way for the zine as the project chosen is that I love using alternative texts as knowledge, texts of knowledge. And I also always do a project-based evaluation in my classes to allow for students to be creative and express themselves fully. And so when I say alternative texts, I mean podcasts, right? Documentaries, television shows, movies, so many different sources of knowledge. I love bringing those into my classroom. And the goal of those is twofold. One, it's actually accessible versus a $200 textbook that may then not allow students to buy groceries that week when they buy that text, right? So more accessible, but also these types of knowledge are just more accessible for students to imagine that they themselves could produce that source of knowledge. They could, in theory, record a podcast episode. They could record a TikTok series explaining a certain concept that educates people, right? And so I love including alternative forms of text and knowledge in my class. I want students to feel like they can achieve those things and that those things have value within the classroom space. And as far as projects go, I'm no stranger to creative projects in my classes. In my Sociology of Corrections class, they produce an infographic for their final project. In my Sociology of Trafficking and Erotic Labor course, they'll do a content media analysis and produce some media. So those are great. But for my Gender Crime and the Criminal Legal System course, I really wanted to think critically about what it would mean to assign a final project that was steeped in community, that was driven by community. What would that even mean or look like? And so in my first semester here at MSU, I went to the Voice Center on campus, which is the office on campus that supports survivors, students on campus who have experienced domestic violence, dating violence, sexual violence, harassment, et cetera. As well as spoke with SASA, or the Students Against Sexual Assault, which is a student organization on campus. And so we talked for a very long time about what it would mean to partner with them, my class actually partnering with these organizations to create a project that would serve the community, that would give my students access to be knowledge producers within their community, and also support their peers who maybe have experienced these things. And that is where the student zine was born. And so many of you are now hearing me say zine over and over and are like, what are you talking about? So what is a zine? Literally pronounced zine, so like short for magazine, if you will. And it is, I'm gonna give you an annoying definition. It's boundless, right? It has no constraints. It can take a lot of different forms. Typically, they look similar to what's here on the screen, sort of small pamphlets, booklets, and they are typically small batch productions and are definitely considered a piece of art or art expression. They have existed since the 1930s approximately, but really gained popularity in the 1970s with the punk alternative scene as sort of an alternative to the traditional publishing route. Because essentially, if you have an idea or if you have something that you care about and you have a pen or crayons or even a hunk of charcoal and you have some paper, you can make a zine. And you can fill that zine with anything that you care deeply about. And so that's exactly what I have my students do. There's very few parameters for this project, but really they choose a topic that is at least somewhat related to class. The Voice Center and SASA both do come into my class and speak and connect with students, so many students actually want to produce resources that they can use, the organizations can use, but ultimately it's, again, boundless. Students choose topics that are so varied, and the way that they engage in this project is really creative freedom. That's the name of the game. And so not only then are they producing these zines for several weeks through the semester, but each semester we partner with SASA and the Voice Center for an event. And students then attend this event, disseminate their zines, have conversations with folks who are taking their zines and attendees at the event, and just have a grand old time, frankly. And so in spring of 2023, so this last spring, we got to attend, again, in partnership with the Voice Center and SASA, the Bozeman Monologues downtown. If you haven't heard of that, maybe you've heard of the Vagina Monologues, which is historically a feminist sort of variety show, if you will, full of poetry and art. And my students, some of them pictured here, cheekily finishing up their zines just before the event started. But we filled the table with their projects, and attendees of the event were able to connect with my students, discuss their zine topics, discuss the process of creating the zines, and it was incredible. Students felt, and they shared with me that they felt deeply connected to their community, not just their student community, and not just the community of maybe survivors or others who are visiting the Voice Center, but deeply connected to their local community, their local Bozeman community through this event, which was amazing. I always have them take a group photo with me, much to their resentment of it, but I gather them up, take a photo. And again, the event was incredible. And because this event was so moving and students felt, again, a deep sense of connection and commitment to continuing their work in their community, we thought, of course, we'll do this again the next time I teach this class, which was this fall 2023. And so for this event, again, this is a community-driven and community-led project, which means we are always responding to the types of events that SASA or the Voice Center is putting on, right? They have the reins, we're following and supporting. And so this was an event called What Were They Wearing? This was an event where survivors provided their stories, as well as a description of what they were wearing during their assault. Those items were then displayed across the room, and my students had the resource table that was available to anyone who was engaging with this event. And so this was incredibly, again, impactful for my students, where folks who are visiting this event were deeply emotional. Of course, it's a given, right? Discussing and witnessing something like this. Folks were emotional, needed support, and my students were there to support them, both interpersonally, but also through the resources that they had developed for this event. Here we go. Here's another group photo that I've had them do in our table that was full of incredible artwork. And, skip forward. And I wanted to kind of show a closer up view of the zines. So the topics really, run the gamut. They are anything from how to support a friend who's experienced sexual violence, to human trafficking stats from Montana, Some explored access to rights regarding reproductive rights and where they could go in relation to Montana State and the location of those agencies, and also explored the epidemic of murdered and missing Indigenous women. And so again, these zines were varied and expressive and beautiful and just beautifully constructed. And what is so special, I think, also about these is not just that students got to provide these zines and these resources at these events, but any of the leftovers from the batches that they produced are kept within my department, Sociology and Anthropology, as a zine resource library. So future students can actually access all of this work in the future and use these as resources and inspiration and support. As well as I have all students digitize their zines, and I'm working with the Voice Center, SASA, and I'm hoping the library as well to create a digital repository. So essentially, every semester this class is taught, we get to add more and more resources to make a complete, very full and complete repository of resources that is created solely by students for students. And so as I continue to sort of, again, grow and develop my pedagogy, hopefully adding more and more items to my list of how to create community in the classroom, I take this quote and a lot of their work from Bell Hooks, Teaching to Transgress. And it reads, as a classroom community, our capacity to generate excitement is deeply affected by our interest in one another, in hearing one another's voices, in recognizing one another's presence. And so if I have other educators here in the room, which I'm sure I do, I really, truly want you all to imagine what your classrooms would look like if you entered them seeing students holistically. What would it mean to co-create a community space in a classroom with your students and looking at them not only as students, but as knowledge producers and holistic people who have experiences that are invaluable to the material you're teaching? And to students, I know there's a lot of students in the audience, I want you all to take from this that you all are knowledge producers. Not only are you the experts in your own lives, but you are the experts in so many other things. And your voice and opinion and viewpoints matter, truly matter. And I want you all to maybe also get from this that this should be part of your college experience. Asking, demanding from educators that you're close to that you want community and you want yourself as a whole person to be at the center of your education. That's important and it's a right. And experiencing that is, again, invaluable. And lastly, I want you all to imagine how incredible and transformative would a classroom be if educators and students did this all together. Thank you.